So you were the principal China policy advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I'm curious, was he on the same page as you at the beginning regarding China?
I think we're on the same page. I mean, of course, the two pages were not created at the same time. I mean, he already had his own understanding of China and the China challenge. And I, of course, as an academic, and I've been working on China all my professional career. So, and I think, on the other hand, it's not really a coincidence that we sort of connected because this is the understanding of China threat is now a national consensus. So a lot of people who are in the China field were reaching that. I might also want to add that Mr. Pompeo is a very unique individual and a senior leader in the American administration in the sense that he's the only person in the history of the United States who both serve as the top American foreign policy leader in covert and overt realms. And he was the CIA director. That's a covert side of that. And then he became a Secretary of State. That's the overt part of the American foreign policy. So he has a very unusual advantage.
What do you think that advantage gave him?
Well, that advantage gave him not just a sort of a improvised policy on China based upon instinct and tradition. It has a much deeper understanding of Chinese reality. Much of the policy toward China in Washington, D.C. has mostly been about the Americans' deep, sometimes even sort of pathological self-examination of ourselves. In other words, how hawkish or how dovish we should be about China. And we, based upon China, sort of with some kind of what we wish China want to be, but rather on reality of China. As a top intelligence official in the United States, Mr. Pompeo, before he came to the State Department, had a very, very firm understanding of the nature and the key strengths of the regime and what kind of danger it posed to the United States.
Well, I know under the Trump administration, the U.S.-China policy radically changed. How did you help get the government to pivot to focusing on China as not a partner that can be cooperated with, but a real and present threat?
Well, I don't want to overplay my role in changing the policy. I mean, I'm one of the team, right? So I was fortunate enough to be in a good time and perfect timing, and also to be able to work in Secretary Pompeo's office in a capacity of a lead in the policy planning office on China. So the change came with not just a fresh new knowledge about China, because the China problem has been there for decades, and every American leader knows this. The change came with the advent of political courage, and leadership not only can be demonstrated with deep knowledge and great government support with the bureaucratic empire in the United States, but also you have to make the leader know that all this information about China needs decisive action. And fortunately, this country, we had Donald Trump, who had a very, very good instinct about the most important things that the country needs to do. That's the first principle precedents. But most importantly, when it comes to policy formulation, we're lucky to have Mike Pompeo, who really exhibits a great leadership and decisiveness, and in changing some of the fundamental concepts and practice with regard to China policy. So I was very fortunate and lucky to be able to be a part of that.
Well, speaking of those former practices, did Did you experience any pushback from people who had made their careers based on the idea of, opening up to China?
Absolutely. I mean, China policy in Washington has been greatly influenced by some unsavory elements. Being an open society, the United States obviously has strength, but also has weaknesses over there, particularly on foreign policy. American electorate is profoundly interested in domestic issues, not foreign policy as a whole, even though the United States is decisively a global power. So that gives opportunity for, say, for example, the Wall Street to impact American foreign policy, particularly on China. So for a long time, American policy toward China is based upon economic operations. So we ignore the uncompromising, almost confrontational nature of the ideology, political system, institutions. As if U.S.-China relationship is all about making money. And also we do have a lot of influence from K Street, that is a lobbying group. The law firms, the public relations firms, they are the people who basically sign on China's side. China pays them, and they basically create a false narrative about the U.S.-China relationship and exert tremendous influence upon the foreign policy formulation process, particularly with regard to China. The third bad element, I would say, is from the academic and think tank arena. There are many people in Washington, D.C., I would say most of the people in D.C.-based think tanks, their primary approach to U.S.-China relationship is from the foreign policy point of view. That is, how to maintain a stable relationship. So the most popular word in U.S.-China dealings is the word relationship. So their obsession is to maintain it, to make it run correctly, and without much incident disturbances. But they never consider whether this relationship, the framework itself, is flawed and fundamentally unworkable in the long run. So those three things, I think, they all changed when the Trump team came in, and I think we literally sort of shielded ourselves from the impact of the Wall Street. Not 100%, but I would say 80%, 90%. And Mr. Trump came from New York City, and he knew the high finance. He knew the economic side of the U.S.-China relationship. So he came in as an economic president. He tapped on trade. He tapped on currency. He tapped on the hollowing out of Americans' manufacturing bases by China. So Wall Street had very little impact on him. So that's a very big change. Secondly, on K Street, on lobbying, because President Trump thinks he knows a lot about China, which is not totally wrong, and he really relied heavily on his own instinct and ideas. And because of the particular nature and style of his presidency, there's a very strong dislike of him from the lobby group, which actually is dubiously works just fine. No, we don't need them. Thirdly, from the think tank world, from the foreign policy community, that has been unanimously the case that very few really would like to cooperate with the Trump administration on foreign policy. That gives opportunity, like myself and several of my colleagues, to actually to be able to expand our knowledge and our expertise without much of hindrance. That doesn't necessarily mean we don't get alternative opinions from other sectors of the American society. We do. We just get the correct ones. And I think, we, for example, we hear a lot from the Chinese dissidents community. We hear a lot from the religious community. We hear a lot from many of the American companies that have substantial investments in China, but yet been treated terribly by the Chinese government. So our source of information upon which we make our policy is very different, and that's actually is very fundamentally significant.